Thanks for taking the time to listen to our latest content here on the Blood Red channel. Guy here with just a quick message. Do you want the very latest Liverpool FC news directly into your inbox? Well, then sign up to our daily Lfc Newsletter, which will bring you the breaking news and big events from around Anfield. To subscribe, just go to bit.ly/LFC Newsletter. That's bit.ly/LFC Newsletter, or click the link in the description of this podcast and pop in your email address. It really is that simple. That link once more, bit.ly/LFC Newsletter. Well, thanks for your time, and on with the podcast.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo as we get set to discuss the week's big news out of Anfield. With no action to come this weekend, the Reds have the chance to finally grab a breather, albeit after a disappointing showing down at Arsenal. We'll look back on that, as well as some squad news which may see the Reds move into the transfer market. Plus, with Liverpool's title preparations having been confirmed, the King will be getting ready to crown the champions. Alongside myself, Guy Clarke, is our Liverpool correspondent Paul Gorst, our chief LFC writer Ian Doyle, and also Super Red Dan Kay. Gentlemen, how are we all?
Thank you.
Pretty good. I'll take Super Red any day.
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Thanks, Guy. How are you?
Yeah, not so bad. We best, I suppose, get straight into Wednesday night's game, not spend too much time to dwell over what went wrong. Doyle, you were down at the Emirates, and two very uncharacteristic errors really sealing Liverpool's fate and all of their own making.
Yeah, I think the last time, well, certainly there was a time last season at Fulham when both Virgil van Dijk and Alisson Becker were at fault for the same goal, I think it was, that Fulham scored. And Liverpool turned that one around and ended up winning the game 2-1. But this time, it was just strange, wasn't it? I mean, Liverpool had, I think it was 102% possession or something stupid like that. And, you know, Arsenal didn't really offer a lot going forward. I mean, Mikel Arteta was interesting after the game. He basically said, look, the game showed how, we're absolutely, the enormous gap between the two teams. We're miles behind Liverpool. So the only thing we could match them on is effort. And funny enough, that's probably one of the things that a lot of Liverpool fans were saying Liverpool lacked a little bit of effort, but I don't think it was that. I just think it's the intensity, isn't it? With them having already won the league. This has happened before for Liverpool. I mentioned it in my stuff. Dan will remember in 1983 Liverpool, they hadn't actually sealed the league, but they were so far ahead. They took 2 points from the last 7 games and still won by about 10 points. And in 1988, that was probably, well, along with this one, the best Liverpool team that's won the league. They won it with their games to spur, drew quite a few games towards the end, lost a couple. And the problem they had there is they took that into the cup final against Wimbledon and lost, and everyone forgets that was a slightly contributing factor to it. But Liverpool don't even have a cup final now, do they? It's all over. They did have that kind of, could they reach the 100-point mark? Could they beat Manchester City? But for all the talk, I think they'd have wanted to have done it, but it's hardly, the fact that Jurgen Klopp's making changes such as against Burnley's bringing in Nico Williams and Curtis Jones. If Liverpool were desperate to win the league and needed to win, I wouldn't have been surprised if they hadn't played in those games, and you wouldn't have the likes of Harvey Elliott coming on for the last 5 minutes of games. So I think there's the proof itself. Liverpool didn't play. Don't think they actually played that badly, to be honest, against Arsenal. I think Arsenal made it a lot easier for them just by sitting back. And I know we're going to talk about the fan stuff in a bit with fans being allowed back into stadiums, but I'm very much of the opinion it is kind of colouring performances at the moment. I mean, do you really think, well, come on, do we know any Arsenal fans on this podcast here? I mean, if you'd paid money to go and watch Arsenal at home and they produced a performance like that in terms of not, they defended well, but in terms of not really going forward at all at home, the crowd would have been on the backs in the second half. And that affects players because they're human. And when someone's shouting at you for 45 minutes to do something other than what you're actually being told, it does get to you in the end, and it just creates a certain uncertainty. So I think Arsenal benefited from that in the same way that I thought Liverpool would have beat Burnley with fans on Saturday. There's no way they'd have been so passive in the last 10, 15 minutes after Burnley scored. So, I mean, it's hard to be too critical. There were, you mentioned Virgil van Dijk and Alisson Becker. How often do they make mistakes? And then within 15 minutes of each other? It just doesn't happen very often. I think it was just, certainly the Van Dijk one was just a sign of a little bit too laid back, a little bit too relaxed, because that's what people are like when the thing that they've attempted to do, they've done it, and now they're just not going through the motions, but they're certainly not at the same level that's got them where they are now, which is still about 18 points clear, is it? It's Yeah, Liverpool haven't been brilliant since the restart, but they've not been awful. They've hardly fallen off the cliff or anything. But since winning the league, it doesn't really matter, does it?
No, I remember you saying before the City game, actually, that you wouldn't be surprised if City won every game. Obviously, they didn't against Southampton, and that Liverpool dropped points in most of the games. And I suppose, actually, it kind of is transpiring to be the case. But, Gorsty, what do you make of the sort of talk of fans obviously not being known the effect it's having on Liverpool? Not in terms of, I suppose, fans roaring Liverpool over the line, but more, as Doyle was saying there, with Arsenal, when you think back to the Wolves game at Molineux in January, the anxiety of certainly home fans of getting excited and thinking they're going to get one over this Liverpool side, all of a sudden they turn it on and say, well, you're not going to, but obviously no fans in the ground. It's not the same atmosphere they're playing.
No, it's difficult, isn't it, to carry on with the same intensity that Liverpool play at, and there's that famous quote, isn't it, from Pep Linders, that intensity is our identity. And when you think of Liverpool and Manchester City, they do play very different types of football. City are very suffocating with the ball, and it's a carousel that goes round from De Bruyne, the two Silvers. They keep up with the possession, and they invariably have more of the ball than any other team. Liverpool a little bit different in terms of going back to front quicker and getting it through to the front players as fast as they can, and kind of striking while the iron's hot. And when you've already won the league and there's no fans there to watch the subsequent games, and there's been quite a lot of them, let's face it, Liverpool won the league in the quickest ever time, so they pretty much had to play a quarter of the league with no fans in attendance when there's not really riding on it other than, you know, the pride of a certain amount of points. So it's understandable that performance levels are always going to dip and drop, and it's not really a conscious thing, because I think the entire squad are uber professionals who, you know, carry on and prepare for every game in the same way they do, whether it's, you know, it's the Champions League final or whether it's a game in the league that doesn't mean anything. So I think it's almost just a natural thing of when you dip below 1 or 2%, and it does have that knock-on effect. But I can't be too critical, can we, of Liverpool, who I didn't think were too great for the night, and they weren't great against Burnley, particularly second half. They were 25 points before the season resumed, and now they're only 18 clear, so that's quite a drop-off in terms of points. But, you know, does it really matter in the grand scheme of things? Many would argue that it doesn't.
No, and Dan, on the points total front, do you think this squad might look back on it and think, well, that was an opportunity to be listed as the greatest ever team and they've not missed out on it? Or do you think now it's done that we just sort of move on from it all anyway?
I don't think it's a major issue, really. I've seen a couple of things on social media, not even necessarily from Liverpool fans, saying that this has been such a great side that they almost deserve to have some kind of statistical mark against their name. Such has been their dominance and their excellence through the season. But the thing is, they do have that. They've won the league quicker than anybody else in history. That's how dominant they've been. That's how quickly they've blown everybody else out of the water. Yeah, I think it might have been Roy Keane in the last couple of days. He said at the end of the, and he's obviously, was it the last season at one point on Sky, even Carragher got a little bit of a ding dong when Carragher was saying how, you know, Liverpool nearly won the league with 97 points, and he made the point, yeah, but you didn't win the league. And I've seen him in the last couple of days saying, at the end of the day, on your medal, it doesn't say how many points you won it by or how many points you achieved at the end of it. It just says that you won it, and ultimately that's the key factor. Just one thing I'd want to add in about, you know, a slight explanation as to why there's been this kind of little drop off. And I think a stat that kind of stood out to me in terms of just illustrating the drop off, but also illustrating just how magnificent Liverpool have been over the majority of the season. Liverpool have dropped more points in the 5 games since the restart, 8, than in the 31 beforehand. They only dropped 7 points in the first 31 matches, which is just ridiculous. And I think, as the lads have pointed out, when you've had your heart set, you know, winning the league has been such a focus, such a goal for them right from the start, that inevitably there was going to be a lack of intensity once they've hit that. But I think another slight factor has been the unusual conditions that they're playing in at the moment. And I'm not just talking about no fans. The drinks breaks in between each half, the fact of the 5 substitutes. Liverpool are very much a team that rely on intensity and momentum and kind of like, you know, wearing teams down and harassing them to death. And this constant stop-start with more subs, more breaks, I don't think it's helped particularly the way they play. So I think that's maybe another contributory factor to it. But at the end of the day, you know, in 5 days' time, finally the Premier League trophy is going to be lifted at Anfield by Liverpool, not by Blackburn Rovers or anybody else. And that is all that matters.
Doyle, what do you make of that point of the drinks break stopping things? Because Jurgen Klopp, was it after the Aston Villa game, sat in front of the press and said, this is something for 20 years that I've been suggesting we should have, and is actually sort of seems to be quite a big advocate of it. Although I take Dan's point, it does seem to sort of stop the rhythm that Liverpool may have been building till that point.
Yeah, I think he might change his tune after that. I mean, I'm sure I saw stats basically said that Liverpool haven't conceded a goal since the restarts before a drinks break, but they've conceded, all the goals they've conceded has come after them. And it happened against Burnley, straight away against Burnley in the second half. Liverpool did score in the first half later on, but Burnley were better in the second half of the first half, if you see what I'm trying to say there. And against Arsenal, they're dominant, scored the goal, drinks break, and then he kind of sat back, didn't he, a little bit, or just that little lack of intensity, as Gorsty mentioned, and suddenly it was 2-1, and then it doesn't seem to. Well, Klopp likes it. I don't think his players, whether they play a game, it's helped them too much. And on the 5 substitutes thing, I cannot believe that the clubs will vote for that to go through. They can't really, because
the bigger ones will.
Well, this is the thing. As I say, it's good for the bigger clubs because it means they can. They've got bigger squads and the drop off in quality isn't so big. But if you're some of the smaller clubs, it's hard enough trying to compete with the likes of Liverpool and City as it is. But when they're making 5 subs and one player gets a little bit tired and you can bring off, I don't know, for argument's sake, Liverpool brought Kieran. I know he's not played all season, but he's still a Swiss international. He's won the Champions League with 2 separate clubs. He's won the league in I think 3 different countries. And most clubs can't compete with that. That's somebody's barely played for Liverpool this season. That shows you that in certain areas they've got a very strong squad, but. The 5 subs thing, no, I hope they don't. I mean, I've been an advocate for a long time, without which to Boyle get to this point really quickly, that there should actually be less subs, full stop, because you can't really affect in terms of getting teams to be more even. You can't change salary caps. That'll never happen. Obviously, FFP is a complete waste of time because of what's happening in Manchester City. Although they'll argue, well, we didn't do anything wrong. Say, well, how come you got fined £10 million? That kind of thing. I'm sure you've not been mentioned already this week, but.
I was going to say, all right, Jose.
Yeah. I was going to say, but if you're only allowed 3 subs from a bench of 3, then you can have a mass squad if you want. But most of those players aren't going to play, so they'll go out and go somewhere else, and that trickles down to other teams. So other teams get stronger. So I'm of the opinion there'd actually be fewer subs, but that's a long-term thing because what FIFA and the FA do, FIFA, is change the rules of the game to make it more even. You can't have a legal challenge. What, they're going to come to the point where they go, hang on, 11 players is not enough. Let's make it 13 on the pitch so we get more on there. That would never happen. It's still a sport eventually. So if I change something, make it more even, do that. I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, I was going to say also on that point though of substitutions. If that had been the case all season, for example, I suppose a player like Ryan Brewster in January might not have been allowed to go out because he may have been need to be around to aid and be part of the squad. Yet he's gone to Swansea. He's had a cracking second half of the season. But on players then, Gorsty, and on the form that Liverpool are showing, I think it's 1 win in 7 now away from home, albeit the caveat that Liverpool have already won the league. But is there not some kind of worry maybe setting in that a number of the players, perhaps the likes of Oxlade-Chamberlain and Roberto Firmino, not quite hitting the form throughout the whole post-lockdown period, even before Liverpool won the title?
Maybe, but they won it quite quickly, didn't they? There was the Everton game, which is always a dead rubber anyway. Well, not so much a dead rubber, but it's always a pretty. I mean, I think 7 of the last 8 have been draws at Goodison Park, and the other one was 94th minute winner from Sadio Mane. So I think they should just take a point from that game and just not play it every season, to be honest. And then Liverpool won it when they beat Palace 4-0, which is probably one of the best performances of the season. So the subsequent drop-off is understandable. It's explainable. Doesn't make it any less of a concern for some fans who seem to be, certainly the ones I've seen, more glass empty than full at the moment, which is crazy when you think about it. But yeah, I mean, Firmino is an interesting one. He's yet to score from the restart, and obviously scored against Atletico, didn't he? But that was the first goal at Anfield all season, and we've spoken a lot about that in the past. Oxlade-Chamberlain is another one who kind of struggling for a little bit of form, and he's started 3 of the 7 games, I think, which I was surprised about when I read that, because I didn't even think he'd started that many. So yeah, I mean, I suppose you can be a little bit concerned of certain individuals' form since the restart, but I would caveat that by saying that it was run pretty quickly into the return, wasn't it?
Yeah, what do you make of it, Dan? Any sort of reason for worry or not?
I certainly don't think it's a reason for worry. I think it's kind of inevitable. I mean, I think what we've got to remember is, Liverpool have playing with an unbelievable level of intensity and excellence and drive for 2 seasons. It's not, and obviously one very elongated season that we still haven't quite concluded yet. And all this work, day after day, training, matches, non-stop, has all been predicated on winning the league and getting their hands on it. And now it's actually happened. There's an old saying, isn't there? The only thing worse in life than not getting what you want is getting what you want. And I think it's a mental shift for them that I think is going to take some time to actually set in. The way they is so kind of goal driven in terms of striving for the top prizes. And now that it's there, they've obviously been in this like 3-4 week hiatus where you win a cup competition, you literally get your hands on it within 10 minutes, aren't you? Whereas obviously it'll be 4 or 5 weeks after the Chelsea Man City game by the time they actually get it. So they've been in, I wouldn't say purgatory, because it's not exactly been hell, but it has been an unusual, unique situation that they've never been through before, and they'll probably never go through again. So, one thing I have actually quite enjoyed is seeing Jurgen Klopp, seeing how annoyed Klopp has been after some of the games. I remember chatting with a mate after the game on Wednesday and watching his interview and saying it'll be down to pop someone on the way home now. And that to me shows that I don't think he's there. I think Gorst made reference to it in his report the other night that it's almost like it's a bit of a box ticking exercise now, just getting through these games. I think we will see it. The point is, I think we'll see a totally different Liverpool once 2020-2021 starts. We might need a couple of new players or a couple of fresh faces or certainly a bit of a reset. But these unique set of circumstances have had a bit of a mental effect on them. They're human beings.
Yeah,
I think that's something to be expected.
Yeah, it's good in the sense that they've managed to, because they won it so early, they've had the reaction to winning the league in 7 games that doesn't really matter. That's the thing.
Rather than the first 7.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I remember I was in America last year on the tour, and Klopp was absolutely not fuming, but he had enough of the team celebrating being Champions League winners. He really didn't like, every time he did a press conference, he's like, stop, he didn't say stop asking me these questions, but the locals were all, they wanted to know what's it like to win the European Cup, what's it like to win the Champions League, this, that, and the other. It's like, it were great, but it's a new season now, so we need to crack on with this. And I wouldn't say that he thought that people's minds were being distracted, because still a lot of the players weren't available for that tour. You saw Liverpool's results in the friendlies. Most of them were not particularly great. The performances weren't great, and it's funny that thinking about it now, there were worries going into the season that how are Liverpool going to react to them. And then of course within about 3 weeks they'd won about 5 games, they'd won a trophy, and they were top of the league, and then they never really looked back because Man City slipped up a couple of times, so that was it. So it is good that they've got this reaction out of the way now, rather than, and I'm going to say the next season starts, we're pretty sure it's going to start mid-September. What are we now? Mid-July. It's less than 2 months. We haven't even finished this season yet. So it's good that it's happening now.
Yeah, and Liverpool, of course, need to be wary. Manchester United are setting the benchmark in the Premier League, according to Rio Ferdinand.
They are not. They are not setting the benchmark. They've gone all the way from 5th to 5th.
Yeah, exactly. We best, though, if Jurgen Klopp might not want to dwell on trophy successes, we sure can here on the Blood Red podcast. And this week as well, then, Gorst, the title preparations all confirmed. The images had started emerging of some of the seats in the Kop being cleared. And, well, it seems as though Liverpool are going to try and make this, I suppose, authentic celebration as they can, albeit obviously the fans won't be in the ground. Yeah,
there was a tweet from Conor McNamara, wasn't it, who works at the BBC, and he tweeted there was kind of a shadow setup of what would be a podium, and that was on the Kop. And I must admit, I was at Anfield on Saturday for the Burnley game, and I didn't even notice it myself. And I've seen the pictures since, and then obviously with the news on Wednesday night that there will, some sort of formal presentation, which is good to hear. I mean, obviously it's not going to be anywhere near the same, with 54,000 fans in Anfield cheering on that moment and spilling out onto the streets and, the city centre celebrations after it and all that. But I think it is important to mark this event with some sort of official ceremony, and it'll be a special moment, won't it, when Kenny Dalglish kind of passes the torch to Jurgen Klopp and hands out the winners' medals, and Jordan Henderson and his mate together. It'll go on the podium and celebrate another trophy that they kind of become an expert to celebrating on podiums now, aren't they, over the last 13 months. They've done it, the Champions League, the Super Cup, the Club World Cup, now the Premier League, which is the one that they've wanted. So it's going to be it'll be a bit of a surreal moment and a bit of a strange one, but it will be a celebratory atmosphere on the pitch, and it's going to be really intriguing to see how all that unfolds, to be honest, because it's not going to be a traditional lap of honour the way there is for every home game at the end of the season. It's almost going to be a little bit of a surreal one, as I say, but looking forward to it nonetheless. It'll be a special moment that so many fans around the world have waited 3 decades for.
Yeah, and I suppose, Dan, albeit weird, obviously no fans in there, and it being the moment that so many Reds have been waiting for, but it's in touch that Sir Kenny Dalglish is going to be involved in the ceremony itself.
Absolutely, there's no more fitting person to present the trophy to. Jordan Henderson, as Gorst said, passing the torch on. He was manager to not just to win the league for Liverpool, but to win a Premier League at Anfield, because of course he was Blackburn Rovers manager in 1995 when they did it as well. It's we've had a long time to think about this and what it's going to be like. And I remember when Chelsea won their quarter-final and we found out that the game was going to be moved to the weekend, initially having a little bit of a cob on, thinking, we can't even have it on a weekend type thing. But I heard how things actually play out now. Apparently there's going to be some kind of like pyrotechnic lights, and I actually think it's going to look better at night than it would do. And particularly bearing in mind how much flipping grey weather we've had lately as well. On a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, I do remember quite early in lockdown seeing Celtic's title presentation. They cancelled the rest of the league, didn't they? And they were just presented. They were just had it presented to them on a on a Saturday afternoon at Parkhead. And to be honest, it made me really sad watching it, thinking, is this what it's going to be like for us? Whereas now, the fact that it's it's going to be midweek, which for people who have to work the next day, there's going to be a fair few sore heads, I think, on Thursday morning, and a fair few people putting their phones on silent. But just the fact that it's on, we always say, don't we, games under floodlights have a little bit of extra zing to them, and it's not going to be the same. I can't pretend I got a little bit heartbroken that having gone to Anfield since 1984, having had a season ticket for like the last 20 years, this moment that I and many others have dreamed about is we're not going to be there for. But you've got to keep things in perspective. There's been tens of thousands of people in this country and around the world who've had far more serious things to deal with in recent weeks. So you've got to keep things in check and be grateful. If me not being in the ground was the price to pay for Liverpool winning the league, then I'll take that.
Doyle, what do you make of it? A man, I'm sure, who deeply cares about the aesthetics of it all, with it all taking place on the Kop as well.
What does that mean? Well,
I was expecting you to go, I'm not bothered, they're going to be handed the trophy and that's it.
I think it's a nice touch that they're doing it in the Kop, though, because they can't be amongst the fans. At least they can be in the place where, famously the fans are going to have the banners around them. Yeah, I must admit, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting because obviously me and Paul will be at the game, and without giving too much away, we're sat absolutely miles away from the pitch now. They do it it's completely opposite to Arsenal, by the way. Arsenal were right in front of the dugout, so that was actually quite an experience just watching them all getting on with it and shouting and screaming. It's funny that all of the shouts that when you played five-side or something football, just playing with your mate, exactly the same. They're exactly the same towards its players.
Doesn't want it.
There was one funny bit. I don't want to go off too much on a tangent, but there was one funny bit where there was two Arsenal players, Pepe and somebody else, kind of bumped into each other because they're going for the same ball, and they both turned around and went, "Oh!" And all of the Arsenal bench and all of the subs got up and basically just said, "Just effing well, get on with it." All of them to a man, all of them just got up and said exactly the same thing. But anyway, going to the point, we probably won't be able to see it as well. So it'll be something that'll be obviously for the players, and it'll be for all the fans. It's a massive show, not just so much for the people watching on television, but for the people who you'll be able to step out your house if you're living in Liverpool, and you'll be able to look up and you'll see the fireworks, and you'll hear, if you're nearby, you'll be able to hear it. So it will feel as though they're putting on as much of a show as they possibly can. And also, very much of what Klopp said in the past, when fans are allowed back in, this won't be the only time that they're doing a celebration or picking up that trophy, because when everyone's back in there, not like when there's a few of them in there, but when they're all back in there, which will be some point next season, they'll do it again. And they've said, he said, I think we'll wait for as long as possible until we're able to parade this trophy in front of all the fans who followed us all the way through this season. And it'll be a parade. So it's, I know Liverpool fans have been saying they're going to be unbearables, and some of them have been, although lately some of them have been unbearable by moaning about the fact that Liverpool are only 15 billion points clear at the top. I think just wait until they start celebrating lifting the title about 3 or 4 times over the next 6 months.
Yeah, I suppose that is the thing. Liverpool are going to get a chance to stretch this out. And I suppose today as well, Gorst, we found out that the government is certainly working towards supporters returning to Anfield, returning to stadia around the country in October.
Yeah, so the line today, wasn't it, from Boris Johnson that, I'm going to kind of open and allow fans in time for October. I think it all ties in with this government trying to kind of kickstart the economy as quickly as they can. It's not going to be 54,000 Anfield, is it? And they're obviously going to come to some sort of compromise there and have X amount of fans kind of socially distanced across the terraces and so on. So it will be interesting to see what kind of the first ballpark figure is for the attendance at Anfield in October. I was told a couple of weeks back that there already have been discussions between the club and supporter groups about as and when they can come back. So it's all welcome news, isn't it? It's already happened in, is it Denmark or Norway? Somewhere in Scandinavia, I think, where they're already allowing it, and it does work by the looks of it. All the fans are kind of well spaced out from each other, but they will be able to create some sort of atmosphere. So that'll help the game. That'll help the intensity of the game for Liverpool from a footballing perspective. It also helps get the money back into the tills, as it were. Because Liverpool are missing out on around about 3 million for every home game at the moment. So that'll be up by fans coming back into it, even if it's only a third of the 54,000 capacity. So all good news, but it still seems like quite a long way away, doesn't it? It's still 2 months away. But yeah, I mean, it's welcome news, certainly.
Yeah, I think we got 2 Dan Kays on the screen. I can see which one's moving, but there is an extra one on the screen. Just the other one doesn't start speaking out of turn. But Dan, it is great news. It is great news that not only are you back with us on the pod, having just dropped off briefly there, but also that the fans will be returning, and hopefully, as what we spoke about right at the start, it sort of kickstarts Liverpool's stronger performances when fans are back in grounds.
Well, absolutely. Liverpool are a team that very much rely on the 12th man, the power of Anfield. I've even heard some suggestions that, particularly how well City have played since the restart, that there is a school of thought going around that if the whole season had been played without fans, Liverpool would have come nowhere near winning the league. One of them, isn't it? If my aunt had oranges, she'd be my uncle. I'm not too worried about that one. I think this news breaking, particularly at the moment when this is probably the week when our absence from matches is feeling as more pronounced than ever. The knowledge that the title parade is going to happen on, the trophy will be given on Wednesday and we won't be there. It can really feel that it's going to start to bite. But as Gorsty pointed out, little by little, the public are starting to come back to public events. He mentioned in Denmark, some sports fans are coming back there. And it's happening in this country as well. Apparently, even before the end of the month, some cricket fans are going to be allowed into the Oval to watch the Surrey v Middlesex friendly there before the start of the shortened county championship season. Apparently, fans will be able to get into the Crucible in Sheffield to watch some of the World Snooker Championships. And Glorious Goodwood, the racing, in August, apparently, there will be some spectators there. So something I did want to mention, a couple of powers of mine, obviously, we've been talking about the situation off and on for months and, how important it is for fans to be present. And a mate of mine, Mark mentioned a while back that, possibly the game when the title could have, if it was possible, even getting some of the fans in just to see the presentation. Would that be something the club could consider because, you know, if it wasn't for a presentation, it'd be much quicker. Now, obviously, that's a complete non-starter for Wednesday, but he's made the point again, just when we were chatting earlier today, it would be brilliant if Liverpool as a club could be proactive and creative to maybe lead on a couple of pilot events at Anfield that would give us the chance to see the trophy. I mean, whenever these kind of things happen, I remember there were test events before the opening of the new main stand, weren't there? And I think it's inevitable there will need to be some kind of test events, pilot events, to kind of, so people could understand how the logistics and everything could work. And, you know, the point is, something like this, you could potentially have 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 in and out of Anfield in half an hour, an hour, just to kind of test the water. So, you know, these are the things that fans are talking about. I'm sure, as Gorsty mentioned, clubs and authorities and administrators are starting to have these discussions as well. And we hope, you know, obviously it's got to be led by the public health situation. We hope that will continue, you know, the numbers will continue to fall. Although we have one person a day is dying, it's still one too many, really. But we hope that this all feels like a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm sure the Emirates will look fuller than when there's been 60,000 there in the past as well. But
glad you said that, Guy.
yeah, that's another issue. But Doyle, it's going to have to be handled with a lot of care. Certainly, the logistics of how the club sort of go about operating this, because there are so many thousand season ticket holders at Liverpool, as well as people who obviously come from outside of the city to watch the Reds.
Yeah, it's do we, you know, what counts as an essential journey is coming from, you know, let's do the old cliche, coming from Norway to watch Liverpool play at home, you know, something like that. Is that really essential? I mean, the people involved might say yeah, and I'm sure that the plane companies might say yeah, but you know, I'm not sure overall. It's interesting because I think the actual sitting people down in the stadiums is the easy bit. The hard bit is getting them in and out. I mean, how does that work? I mean, I think ultimately, a long way down the line, it's just going to come down to personal preference. People go, well, we know the risks and we understand them. Do you really want to go to a football game and go and sit there? You know, it's outside. Will the fans have to wear masks? I would assume that they would do. You know, how does that affect the singing? Will there be any singing? Will that be allowed? Imagine that, no singing allowed at football grounds. You know, I can't happen. But, you know, this sounds like a stupid question, but it's, you know, it's if you apparently... I was going to say, you know, yeah, that's Arsenal again, isn't it? The Emirates, they've been doing that for years. You know, trailblazing down there. Lovely seats, by the way. I sat in one of the normal seats, you know, padded and everything.
Padded, aren't they? Yeah.
Cinema seats. Yeah. They like that in the away end as well. I've always thought.
Really? It's very nice.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a good call. I thought it was just
classy touch. That's what it is.
Seats, yeah. Well, it's fair because they spend most of the time backsides. There's nothing to get them out of the seats anyway. What was the question? Going back to fans. Yeah, I think the logistics of it is going to be the important thing. But as I say, I think ultimately it'll come down to personal preference. There'll be people who go, okay, right, we've heeded all of this advice. We would like the option to be able to go on, you know, and it's on us. But you know, as we know, life doesn't really normally work like that.
No, certainly not. Well, we've still got a couple of things we want to battle through before we wrap up here on this week's Friday edition of the Blood Red podcast. And Paul, I'll come to you with this other line, and it's another sort of administrative line out of football this week, that the transfer window dates have been chosen, the 27th of July to the 5th of October. And on transfers, obviously it's everyone's favourite topic. Yasser Larouci this week sort of being set on his way, and Adam Lewis has signed a new contract. Two left backs in the youth system that people are probably wondering why we're talking about. But with Larouci going on a permanent basis and Lewis may be out on loan, that left back conundrum surfaces once more.
It does. I'll let Doyle talk a little bit more Yasser Larouci as that was his story yesterday. But Adam Lewis signed a new contract earlier this week, didn't he? And now it looks like Larouci could be on his way. It's an interesting one because I would have had those two the other way around in the Anfield pecking order, and maybe they were, but it seems as if Larouci is kind of agitated to move, and he sees himself playing regularly somewhere else, which is fair enough. Liverpool obviously difficult team to get into at the moment, and Andy Robertson has got that spot nailed down. So anyone who wants to be a left back at Liverpool know that they're going to have to be a reserve, and he doesn't miss many games, does he? So maybe that's part of Larouci's thinking. If Lewis does leave on loan, I think Jurgen Klopp is comfortable in the knowledge that Joe Gomez can play there, and obviously James Milner is the deputy at the moment. Personally, I don't think either of those provide anywhere near what Robertson does, and that would almost go without saying given how Robertson is, but they're not even a similar type of fullback. Gomez is out of position as is Milner, even though he played a full season there. I think Liverpool would need someone of a similar ilk to Robertson, someone to bring that balance when Robertson's not on the team, a left-footer who's got crazy energy levels and decent stamina. But they're hard to find, especially when they're going to come in and not play much football. So Robertson solved almost a generational problem, hasn't he, at left back? But now Liverpool kind of have another one there, and be interesting to see what Klopp does, if anything, to be honest.
Yeah, and Doyle Larouci did get a few first-team chances this season. Of course, came off the bench in the Merseyside derby in the FA Cup at Anfield. And I suppose he and Pedro Chirivella, two players who got chances in notably that game, have now decided actually that they want to go and taste senior football on a more frequent basis.
You can't blame him, really, can you? I mean, as you say, he's had that taste. I mean, he had a few injuries this season as well. I think he would have played in the League Cup a bit earlier on, but he was injured. I think he was injured for one of those games. Yeah, well, Larouci, he made a bit of a breakthrough last summer when he featured quite heavily in the games over the summer, the pre-season friendlies. But the difference is that Lewis has agreed to sign a new contract at Liverpool and Larouci hasn't. So Liverpool have gone, well, you're in the last 12 months of your deal. If you don't want to sign one, we're quite happy for to try and get a fee for you. And it looks as though, quite rightly, there are teams interested in him. Brentford and Leeds, who could both be playing in the Premier League next season. You never know. Certainly Leeds will be, unless they massively leads it from this position. Although I can't see them doing it. But the fact that the teams of that standard are the ones that are linked with him and are interested in him, have got in touch about him. That shows he's a player. He's got something about him. He used to be a left winger, and it was only I think it was about 2 years ago that he started playing at left back. So he is, in that sense, a little bit like Robertson in terms of he's very good going forward, but Robertson's a lot better defensively. That's maybe one thing that Larouci hasn't got in his game. Whereas with Adam Lewis, he's more of a defender than a forward. It is interesting because I written a story for this afternoon. Basically, last year when Liverpool weren't signing anybody in the summer, we were briefed that if there's anybody that they could be interested in, it would be somebody who's versatile, who could play down the left flank, who could possibly play mainly as a defender, but also do a job a bit further forward, but under the understanding that they wouldn't be first choice in either position. And I think Liverpool are in exactly the same position, although you could argue that they've got more options going forward. Curtis Jones can play on the left. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, of course, you'd mentioned him. He can do something on the left, and Minamino could possibly do play there as well. So there are options, but left back is a position where I wouldn't be surprised if Liverpool did sign a left back of some sort over the next. I think what the transfer window goes on till 2024, does something stupid. It just seems to be open forever. But I would imagine that Liverpool might look to do something at left back.
It's open for 10 weeks, Doyley. That's what the duration for the window is going to be. Dan, I suppose it's not close, but probably left fullback is number one on the priority list for Liverpool in terms of bringing recruitments in.
I think it's certainly got to be right up there. I mean, the way Liverpool play, the fullbacks is so important. Balance of the sides, both attacking and defensively. There are Nico Williams, I think, has shown that he can be certainly a very able deputy to Trent on the right hand side. You've got Joe Gomez who can also be there as well. But I think bearing in mind the way Liverpool have by and large been relatively lucky with injuries to key players over the last couple of seasons. They haven't been without them. It would be folly to suggest that. But they won't always be lucky. So, and this is the difficulties that a club like Liverpool will have with a manager like Klopp, because he's made it very clear he doesn't want a massive squad. He likes having a relatively small pool of players, but obviously within that you've got to have enough flexibility and versatility to be able to cover all eventualities, or certainly as many as you can get. So I mean, it used to be the bit of a Carragher and Neville joke, didn't it? Didn't Carragher no one wants to grow up being Gary Neville? But I don't know. I think you probably get a fair few kids around Liverpool who want to grow up being Trent Alexander-Arnold now, and I think him and Robertson to a slightly lesser degree have shown that fullback actually is interesting and rewarding positions on the pitch because you're involved a lot and you can shape games from there potentially if you're good enough. So it's a big opportunity for someone if they're prepared to come in, play second fiddle to a certain extent to Robertson, but if they're versatile enough that they can play in midfield and they're patient enough to wait for their opportunity, it could be a big opportunity for maybe one of the lesser heralded lights. I don't see Liverpool going and putting 60 million on a Benjamin Mendy like Manchester City are probably going to go and do again this summer. But that's not how we operate. I saw a great tweet a couple of days ago saying, look at a lot of one of Liverpool's greatest ever sides, which I think got absolutely no problems about saying that that's what this is. A lot of them came from very inauspicious backgrounds, and yet now are world stars. And so a lot of young, hungry footballers will be thinking, well, if I play my cards right and if I get the right break of the ball or the right agent to get me in there, this could be my big ticket.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that one does play out. Jim actually recently told you, Gorsty, didn't he, that Trent has actually now made the right fullback position sexy. So we will have to wait and see how the fullback positions do play out for Liverpool, and if they do indeed dip into the transfer market. Final thing for us then to look at, it's going to be award season very shortly indeed. The football writers deciding who their players of the year are. You three are all football writers. I talk an awful lot about football. We best all get round and have a chat about who we think are contenders for Player of the Year, and well, basically who we think could win it. And Gorsty, I'll let you take the floor first on this one.
Does it have to be a Liverpool player?
It can be whoever you want.
I mean, I think Kevin De Bruyne has shown himself to be the division's outstanding player, hasn't he? So I expect him to win it. But from a Liverpool perspective, I'd love to see Jordan Henderson win it. I think he's in the form of his career. Absolute leader on the pitch, off the pitch. He's doing great things for his teammates and for his teammates and for the wider community. And Liverpool have shown lately that they miss him, don't they? They miss his drive, his determination, his underrated passing ability. And I think Virgil van Dijk has kind of gone under the radar because of how good his standard is and of how consistent he is, really. So those two, and Sadio Mane's had a fantastic season as well with 21 goals. So those three are the Liverpool contenders, but I think this might be the one where the Bruyne nicks it.
For a moment, then you were going to keep listing the Liverpool squad. Doyle, who are you going for?
There's no Arsenal players, I'm afraid.
Ouch.
I know, yeah, controversial call. As I said, Ozil, but he never plays. You've got Kevin De Bruyne is probably the Premier League's best player. Sadio Mane and Mohamed Salah are probably Liverpool's best two players. Trent Alexander-Arnold is probably the Premier League's best young player. So I'm not going for them. I'm going to go with Jordan Henderson because I think that it isn't just about what you do on the pitch. Although in his case, as Gus has just said, with him not playing, now we actually get to see what he actually does provide. It's not always about fine passes and all of that. There's more to it. And the other thing is that if you ask the other players what they think, they'll all say, certainly Liverpool, they'll say Jordan Henderson, and it will be between Jordan Henderson and Kevin De Bruyne, two players that, for differing reasons, they're the ones that the fellow professionals have, certainly for this season, have got the greatest admiration for. De Bruyne purely on the basis of his talent, and Henderson for the way he has played, the contribution he's made to a team that, as we've mentioned how many times, are the best in the world, in England and in Europe. But also the way that he's handled himself and the example that he sets to the other teammates. When you've got teammates who, like Virgil van Dijk and like Alisson Becker and the ones that we've mentioned who look up to him, so you've got players of that standard. And his manager, Jurgen Klopp, knows a good player when he sees one. And he's somebody who stood by him when things weren't going particularly well a couple of years ago. And they've all got the rewards. And you saw what the reaction was from the pair of them when they did win the league. They were both in, separately in tears, and that's what it means. And that's why Henderson deserves to be the, he may not be the football writers player of the year, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets the PFA one. Yeah,
I have to say, for me, it would be Jordan Henderson too. That Liverpool waited so long for this league title. He is the captain of the side. He embodies it. He's the driving force of it. And I'm with you on that one, Doyle. Dan, who's your shout though to?
It's hard to argue with any of that. I mean, from a non-Liverpool perspective, Kevin De Bruyne, boyhood Liverpool fan Kevin De Bruyne, it should be said, is outstanding footballer. He is a joy to watch. I think Raheem Sterling probably deserves a mention.
Yeah.
Because his consistency, I think, this season has finally started to kind of be there to fulfill all that promise that we saw, obviously, in his early years at Anfield. And I think, the maturity and the leadership he's shown in a kind of non-footballing sense as well. I think, it's certainly worthy of mention. For Liverpool, I mean, one of my favourite moments of the season was aftermath. I didn't notice at the time in the away end, but in the aftermath of Lallana's equaliser at Old Trafford, and there's a great picture of Mane tugging them back to the halfway line, going, "Come on, we can still win this." I mean, we didn't, but that's been his mentality. He has been a transformative player for Liverpool, without question. There's been a few of them that have come in recent times, but I think Mane has done as much as anybody to take Liverpool to the title. But I don't think you can look past Jordan Henderson. His leadership, his example. I think his strength of character as well. I mean, Doyle mentioned Virgil van Dijk before. I think when Van Dijk came in, I think in those early months, people kind of felt he's the captain without the armband. And maybe I read too much into things sometimes, but I have almost detected there was possibly a little, I think Henderson knew that. I think Henderson could see that. I think there were times towards, maybe in the midway through last season, when there were times when Henderson wasn't getting picked. Henderson wasn't always in Liverpool's best 11. I think maybe he might have thought, am I getting edged out here? His progression into a more advanced role in the latter stages of last season kind of really helped him. Kicked on, he scored some big goals. Obviously, Liverpool led Liverpool to European glory in Madrid, and I think he's really kicked on this season with his captaincy, with his leadership. And I've always kind of said, great teams need leaders and captains all over the pitch. You can argue football isn't a game like cricket or games like cricket or rugby. The captains have quite a strong on-field influence in tactics and calls during the game. You can make a claim that in football, really, all they do is toss the coin at the start and lift the trophy at the end. But Henderson has gone above and beyond that. I love the fact that a lot of Liverpool fans took a long time to warm to him. One of my favourite moments during lockdown was when a friend's dad had a birthday, and they had a birthday cake made for him with the 3 trophies Henderson had lifted, with a quote from the dad saying, "We'll never win a trophy as long as Henderson's in the side." The fact that he's proved so many people wrong, I think, is one of the most joyous aspects of it. So if it was up to me, it would be Jordan Henderson. Yeah.
Yes, 3 votes for Jordan Henderson, 1 for Kevin De Bruyne. Liverpool 3, Man City 1. I think I've heard that one before. Well, anyway, that's it from us here for this edition of the Blood Red Podcast. Of course, the Blood Red Podcast will be back with you on Monday. Plenty of content coming up across our YouTube channel and our podcast feed as well through the course of the weekend. Keep yourselves safe and well. And until next time, it's bye for now.